could be hospitalized but don't require an ICU stay, or may have to be admitted to the ICU. So it's really the low risk. It's a low risk disease, but for those that have risk, it can be serious. So some of those risk factors, really there's two major risk factors, age and health. So for age, really anyone over age 60 is at a higher risk. That number seems to go up a lot more. If you compare that to the death rate, let's say in 2009, when we had a high death rate for influenza, the average age was rather around 50. So this disease is more, people who are older are more susceptible to have a higher risk factor, and also, oh, there went my stuff. Okay.
All right, now I think you've got control. You should be able to use your remote. Can everybody see the screen now? Sorry about that, Jeanette. I didn't know it would change your side. So, all right, so you should be good.
That's okay. Now I'm not sure how to advance.
You click enter.
Click where?
You just click enter and it'll change to the next slide. Oh, it's on the other thing. Or I can, if you need me to change the slide, I can just do it.
Yeah, it's not. So let's go ahead and advance. Yeah, it won't let me now on my end.
Click it. I can change it.
Yeah, go ahead and advance it, please. Okay, keep going. Keep going. Okay, right there, and we're good. So age is one risk factor, the other is chronic conditions. So hospitalization is actually 6 times higher in individuals who do have the chronic conditions that are listed here. So lung disease, if you're immunocompromised, smoker, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, liver disease, kidney disease, or neurological disease. Next slide. Okay, next is some symptoms. So again, in the beginning, we have gone back and forth with symptoms, because at first it was one symptom and then it was a few symptoms, then certain people had different symptoms. And when you look at it, really the top ones are fever. That seems to be the biggest thing. Some pain, cough, and then an altered sense of smell. Those are really now kind of emerging as the top symptoms. However, other people have runny noses, they have cough, chills, fatigue, sore throat, difficulty breathing, muscle pain that might mimic like the flu, diarrhea, and vomiting. So we have seen things kind of across the gamut, but the ones at the top, the fever, the pain up here, the cough, and that altered sense of smell seem to be emerging to the top. All right, next. So we'll talk next about transmission. Excuse me. So this is, again, as more research emerges and the more we know about it, this is a virus that is transmitted via respiratory droplets. So on the right, you'll see the standard, or large, I should say, respiratory droplet. That's 5 to 10 times smaller than can even be seen with the naked eye. The 5 microns is a smaller droplet, a very small droplet to the left, and then you'll see that coronavirus is about that size. So that's compared to that standard respiratory droplet. What the coronavirus does is it actually kind of deposits and in that respiratory droplet. So when you cough, talk, sneeze, what have you, it comes out of your mouth attached to those droplets. Okay, next slide. So the main way it's transmitted then is that person to person. So by breathing, coughing, as I mentioned, really the risk goes up when you're closer than 6 feet, because most of those large particles can fall to the ground within that distance, beyond that distance. So the longer you're near someone, the more of the virus that you breathe in, the more likely you would be to be infected. And especially if you're there greater than 15 minutes, that's when it really kind of goes up in the risk. Touching a surface that has been infected can also get you infected. It's a smaller risk, but it also is a risk factor. Okay, next. So we've heard about contact tracing and contact, but really what makes you that contact is if you have been with someone 48 hours before they showed signs and symptoms of COVID, to 10 days after their symptoms started. Near them for those 15 minutes we just talked about, and 6 feet or less. All right. So now we'll talk about reducing the transmission. So really the CDC recommendations to protect yourself and others are 3 main things: social distancing, wearing masks, and washing your hands throughout the day. And those seem simple, but again, those are the most, so far, have turned out to be the most effective that we can do in order to protect ourselves, whether we're at home, whether we're at work, what have you, to make sure that we don't become infected. Okay? So there's really a hierarchy in the controls, and this is where you as employers can come in, because these are things that you have control of some and can really have a great impact. So the most effective, of course, is eliminating the risk. Well, chances are we're not going to all become hermits, go to our homes, never emerge again until no one has the disease and it comes out. So elimination obviously is going to be the biggest thing, but very, very unlikely that we can get that done without having other repercussions like psychological and other issues. So the things that we can do are really engineering controls and administrative controls. Kind of can go hand in hand together with putting up those physical barriers, making sure that there is spacing from an engineering standpoint, and then processes from an administrative control standpoint. So we can talk about those a little further in the next slide. So for our engineering controls, whoops.
Skip one.
One back.
Let's see how I do that.
It's okay. I can talk about it. For the engineering controls, the ventilation is very important. You want to maximize the air exchange in the building that's recirculating, or rather than recirculating. So you want to make sure that you're breathing in fresh air as much as possible and not recirculating the same. Now, sometimes that may take some, as I said, engineering controls. It may have to get with HVAC and understand how that can work in your environment. You want to use fans to blow air from the breathing area out, but what you don't want to do is make sure that you're not blowing onto someone else or onto your customers and away from you. Make sure that you routinely clean ventilation and install a filtration system if possible. And if feasible, outdoor classrooms or outdoor work, what have you, is going to give you the greatest amount of fresh air to breathe. For physical barriers, I know I've seen a lot of great things as I'm out in the community from our physical barriers, where we've got plexiglass up and we've got workstations now that are kind of separated from each other. And there's really, really, again, Ohio's website and the BWC for specific industry, they've got some great tips on different ways that you can also put in those barriers. All right, and then another thing too is making sure that you are kind of controlling the barrier. So, it having one way in that keeps people from passing each other, or stairwells that only go up and only go down. Those sort of things can also, they're kind of a physical barrier of a one-way drive, if you will. Okay, next. Oh, sorry, you were on the slide. All right. Also, you want to make sure that you avoid crowds, particularly indoors. It's really the worst scenario for people to person-to-person transmission is to be in that close proximity, as I already mentioned, within that 6 feet. That's the biggest thing that we can do for our employees and for our customers. Telework when possible. Consider flexible hours and rotating shifts. Stagger arrival times. Establish your maximum capacity. Increase physical space, so reconfiguring the office. And again, that single file movement and maintaining the 6 feet. Now for the administrative controls, it's really important that we as employers do this. And we can tell people, oh, stay 6 feet away. But honestly, people have too much to remember. It's not a natural thing. And so it does have to be purposeful. You have to create those columns where people cannot get next to each other. You have to be able to put all of these things in place and not just rely on human nature to remember, oh, stop, I'm more than, I look like I might be 5 3/4 next to that person. I better step back a little bit. We really need to make sure that we guide people as much as possible so you take the thought out of it. Okay, next. All right, and on our next slide, you want to do visual cues. So again, that's how you can kind of make sure that people see that. If you don't already, consider designating a champion, someone that you would assign to kind of monitor and facilitate the social distancing in buildings. Maybe it's just a little reminder, have a buzzword, 6 feet or something that just lets them kind of be in charge of reminding people to do that. Because again, it is not human nature. We like to socialize, we like to be near each other. I think there's even some comedic skits about the close talkers, and so people are by nature like to get close. Again, we want to implement work teams if possible. So you have the same groups working together all of the time on shifts, and then they're limiting who they see. They're exposed to each other, and maybe not, you've got your A team and your B team. Don't call them A and B, team 1 and team 2, that they only work with each other. So that way, if there is an outbreak of some sort or someone does get infected, that other team has not had that cross-contamination with them. And then limiting size of work groups, obviously having meetings like this, remote meetings, and not getting big groups of people together is going to be the best. Some really common mistakes that people make. So they may go the entire day doing everything right, and then they run into someone in the stairwell and they start talking to them within 2 feet. And maybe they don't have their masks on. They should now, but just even a month ago, maybe they weren't. Being within 6 feet of coworkers on breaks, that's a big one. Everybody kind of goes and they eat, so their guard's down, their mask is down, and they're real close to each other. And then shaking hands with people. Okay. So the last thing on the little pyramid to the right was that personal protective equipment. Now, cloth masks are not essentially PPE as we know it from an OSHA standpoint, but for the sake of talking about personal protective equipment, we'll include those types of masks in here. Really universal mask wearing reduces virus transmission. That we have seen that, we know that it is something that is been researched and proven. cloth masks work. The advantage is they can be washed and reused. Face shields can provide extra protection, but should not be used instead of the cloth masks. They do need to be worn properly though. And you can walk through any store, you can walk probably into any building and see all kinds of fun and unique ways of people wearing masks. So we want to make sure that they fit snugly, that they are over both the nose, mouth, and the chin. Should not be, you see them down to here all the time. You see them over here. Some people push them up. You really want to make sure that they fit snugly and they're doing the job they're intended. Be sure they're secured either behind the ears or with the ties. They should be able to be laundered without damaging their shape. If you damage the shape of the mask when you launder it, it may not fit correctly the next time. If you touch your mask, you want to make sure that you wash your hands because the mask could be contaminated. So every time you touch your mask, take it off, put it off, whatever, you want to make sure that you're washing your hands. And avoid the vented masks, the masks with the little vent holes in them, because that's actually blowing out the air that you're trying to keep in when you are wearing that mask. Okay, next. And then removing masks is something people don't think about as well. You want to make sure that you remove with the ear loops. So my mask, for example, if you can see me, when you put it on and you take it off, you want to use the ear loops. And then you'll fold that kind of corner to corner so that you're keeping what's inside. And then if you're going to launder it, you'll launder that. If you're tossing it, you'll throw it away from there. Again, make sure you're washing your hands afterwards. And then because we've mentioned PPE, I just thought I would throw some stuff in there on gloves too. So you do want to wear gloves when you're cleaning and disinfecting. They're not recommended to wear to the grocery store. They're not recommended to wear around the building all day long. That's really not the purpose of gloves. And then it kind of defeats the purpose because you may be touching things and touching your face and what have you and transmitting just the same way you would if you were using your hands, but now you're probably not washing your gloves. But you do want to wear them when you're cleaning and disinfecting, and you want to wear them when you're caring for someone who's sick. Don't reuse them, don't disinfect them. When you take off gloves, make sure when you have your dirty gloves on, you pull the palm and kind of peel it off. And then the second glove with your clean hand, just kind of put your finger under there and you can take the glove off that way. The purpose, of course, is to not get your hands contaminated. Make sure you throw away gloves in a lined waste container and always wash your hands or use sanitizer. Okay, and next we'll talk a little bit more about masks. So again, masks, you get a lot of eye rolls when you talk about masks. A lot of people don't like to wear them. A lot of people feel uncomfortable wearing them. However, they are, as I mentioned, they have proven to really be a key in helping to minimize transmission. So if you remember back to the slide with the large respiratory droplet and then the regular size one, those come out again as we speak. The next slide. So those large ones can be stopped by the mask. The very small ones may not be blocked. So those might still come out, but those large ones then are going to be caught by the mask that you're wearing and kind of captured in there. So really when you're wearing the mask, you're protecting those around you. If you've got a mask on, you're being protected by those around you, but then it can also help a little bit on your end. But really the purpose is to protect those around you from as it comes out of your mouth to be caught by that mask. Okay, next slide. So one thing is because people are asymptomatic, or we talked about they don't have symptoms, and it can be 1 in 5 that has the symptoms, the other 4 may not. You don't know who's contagious. And 60% of infections are contracted from another person with symptoms, but 40% are contracted from someone who does not feel sick. So really the key for all of us is to make sure that we treat everyone as if they are infected, because we don't know. So we want to be a little illustration to the right kind of tells you how that works with an asymptomatic person who you may just be talking to, looks fine, feels fine. They're not wearing a mask, and all those respiratory droplets are coming out of their mouth. You've got two people on the right. One is not wearing a mask and is breathing all of those respiratory droplets into their mouth, and the other person is wearing a mask, and some of those are being blocked. But if you look down at the bottom, once that person puts that mask on, it really minimizes the amount that's coming out of their mouth. And then the individual wearing that mask also is getting added protection. So that's really the ideal scenario. Two people wearing masks and staying that 6 feet apart. Okay, next slide. So again, we talked about the really 3 big things that we can do: social distancing, wearing a mask, and then last is washing hands. And it seems like such a simple thing. I think we were all taught when we were small children, but it is something that really needs to be reiterated to ourselves and to employees, because it is something that does not occur as frequently as it should, nor does it occur correctly all the time. So next slide, we'll just kind of go over a few things about washing hands. All right, next slide. Okay. Oh. All right, so when and how? So we want to wash our hands often, especially after we've been in public places, blowing our nose, coughing, sneezing, before eating or preparing food, after touching the mask, which we talked about, after using the restroom, changing the diapers, after caring for someone else, and to avoid touching your hands and mouth with unwashed hands. So one thing just to try, everybody should try, count how many times a day you actually touch your face, and each time those hands really should be clean. So it might tell you, throughout the day how often you should be washing your hands as well, because you're constantly touching your face. So you do want to make sure though that you either are using a sanitizer. You can use a sanitizer that's got aloe in it if after you've washed your hands even, or lotion, because it can dry your hands out, and then you could have some irritation on your skin. Okay, next slide. So again, it seems very basic, and if you don't have signs around letting people know how to wash their hands, it may be a good idea, because people aren't, they think they know how to wash their hands, or they wash them, or sometimes they still don't wash them. So really the 5 steps to proper hand washing are to wet with clean water first. So if you, my little exercise here is really go into a public restroom or somewhere where people are washing hands, and watch how many, observe people and see if they're doing these 5 steps. Most people, many people actually, will reach for the soap first, get a little bit of water on there, kind of do this, and rinse them. So really what you should be doing is wetting your hands first, lathering them, soap front, back, in between the fingers, under the fingernails, pretend like you're a surgeon. Scrub for at least 20 seconds, and then really rinse well under clean running water, and then dry with a clean towel or air dry. Don't use the same towel that's been sitting there all day long, or for a week. You want to make sure that you just washed your hands to do a good job when you dry them as well. You can also use hand sanitizer that is at least 60% alcohol. If soap and water is not readily available, make sure you cover the surfaces of your hands and rub them together until they feel dry. You don't want to use sanitizer if your hands are soiled. You really want to wash them if they're soiled. And then also before you eat, you do want to wash with soap and water. Okay, next step. And then just a real quick thing too on cleaning and disinfecting. And again, I know many have implemented a lot of things into the workforce already, but it really is important that some people are letting their guards down now. We were very gung-ho when this first came out, and now that we actually have more cases and it seems to be more prevalent, we're doing less in some areas. So you want to make sure that you are cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched surfaces, including doorknobs, pens, light switches, computers, desks, phones, faucets. If you're not having extra cleaning throughout the day, consider that. And then you want to make sure too that your detergents clean things and it's appropriate for dirty surfaces, but disinfectants actually kill viruses. There is actually a list that's EPA registered that you can see and make sure that what you're using is appropriate to kill viruses. But you do want to have both detergent and disinfectants. Okay, next slide. All right, and we do have social responsibility to risk in others. Our family, coworker, and client safety. Major risk of infection occurs in the home because we're not within 6 feet, we're 15 minutes from each other, and we're typically not wearing our masks. So, you know, we have individuals that may be at home doing things or might be at work, and we're not protecting them properly if they're going to go home and see a family member then who might have health problems or who's at a very high risk or in a high risk social situation where they're being not so socially conscious and then coming back to work and exposing others. So it's kind of a two-way thing. You want to make sure that you're doing the best part that you can when you're in your place of employment and what you can do for your employees, but make sure they understand that they have responsibility as well to do things outside of work to keep those of you safe. And then take advantage of opportunity to educate others about preventing the virus transmission. So, you know, be sure that you are educating everyone in the workforce and that they can go home and also educate others so that we can minimize the risk of transmission. All right, next. And Angie, I know we had a little bit of technical difficulty. Give me a time check on when you want me to wrap up the speaking portion of this.
Okay, sorry about that. I had to unmute myself real quick.
That's okay.
We will try and end the meeting around 9:30.
Okay. I just want to be sure we have, and we may have to just take questions via the chat and answer them later if, you know, and that's okay too if we want to get, you know, Q&A that we can put out after the fact.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. So we'll go on to testing and quarantine, and this is, of course, a very hot topic, testing. We've heard a lot about testing. In the beginning, we didn't have a lot of testing, and that really was kind of a limitation. The labs couldn't come up with testing mechanisms quick enough. First, you had to learn about it. You had to make sure that what you were creating actually tested for what you wanted it to. So that was a bit of a hindrance. They were reserved for the really hot spots like New York and other areas. And so we didn't have as much testing capability to start with. And now we're seeing a lot more. And we can also, we're advancing in the types. So we'll talk about a little bit of testing here on the next slide. So just to ground everyone, really, we talked about those symptoms, the fever, muscle aches, the decrease in smell, and the cough. So if you're sick, you really want to be sure that you go home. Don't come in if you're sick. And if you have mechanisms in place for individuals to do their own self-check when they are at home before they come in, that will prevent people from even coming in too. So, you know, Do they have to kind of do a fever check, or do they have to go through those top symptoms, ask themselves those questions before they come in? I know there's apps. Actually, Try Health even has an app that can help with those symptom checkers for companies, and a lot of the colleges, they have to log in every day what their symptoms are before they're allowed to go to campus. So just making sure that people are not in the workplace when they are sick. But if they do get sick, should call their doctor for probable PCR testing. You want to stay at home and limit contact with family members. Really, until 10 days after the symptoms started, or you're fever free from 1 day. And then, you know, talk to your employees, should be talking to you about what documentation is required for them to return to work. So, you know, that's something too, I'll briefly touch upon a little bit later, but really making sure that you have those policies in place for your individuals who may be sick, or may have tested positive, or may have been exposed to a family member, and what to do with all of those. Okay, next. So on the next slide, we've got talk about tests and what those tests mean. So there's really two big ones that we've heard of, three big ones we've heard about in the media or around. You may know about. There's the PCR test, which really tests for the genetic makeup of the virus. So it tests to see if that there's a detection of that virus. Then the antigen test, which tests for the protein that's a part of the virus. And with the PCR test, it's really the most accurate way. That is the one that is best. It's really best to test about 8 days after exposure, or 3 days after your symptoms start, to get the most accurate result. And if someone is very highly suspicious of an infection, one test may not be enough to avoid quarantine. So sometimes, again, it doesn't detect, like many things, there's an error rate, and so you can have a false negative on those tests, and any test. The antigen test is something that is coming about more now, and this is a rapid test. It's not quite as accurate, but if it's negative and you have symptoms, you may have to do the PCR test for a confirmation. But it's a really good screening, and it can be done quickly. It can be done on multiple people. So that is something that can be used after maybe you have an area that has had an exposure, and you wait a few days and you want to get people tested, or you want to test people on a routine basis before they're coming into work, or before they go to, for example, in nursing homes, they'll test these individuals then before going in to make sure that they are not infected. And so the antigen test is going to be, I think they were just around May is when they really started kind of coming out, and now they're really going to be more on the horizon. So the availability for that testing is going to be a lot greater. And next slide. And I'll also add in there too, there's a saliva tests that are out there. Again, they kind of fall down a little bit further on the spectrum of being accurate. Some are fairly accurate, but some are not very accurate at all. So there's a little bit of kind of back and forth with that one, because it varies a lot. Then the last test is the antibody test. So what that does is it tells you if you've been exposed to a coronavirus in the past. You won't have antibodies for at least 5 days, and really it's recommended about 14 days after you are infected to be able to be tested. So to make sure that you have the antibodies, it does not confirm you have immunity. We don't know enough about this virus to know that you would be immune, or how long you would be immune. So really, public health specialists don't currently recommend this testing for the general public right now. It's just used mostly for epidemiological studies, so they can kind of try to see how long are people that have been infected immune, or what levels of immunity do they have at different times. And so it really doesn't tell you if you have an active infection. So it's not something that's truly recommended just as a standalone, and certainly not recommended to test everyone to say, oh, we're all good, everybody come in, or everybody's had it in the past, we don't have to wear masks anymore because we're all immune. It doesn't work that way, and there's not enough research out there to tell us. Okay, next slide. All right, so again, what to do if you're exposed. If you've been in that less than 6 feet in the 15 minutes, you do want, the health department may call you for possible contact tracing if you've been around someone who has a positive, and every positive test is reported so that they can keep track of this, and they may reach out, they may call and let you know that someone that you've been in contact with recently has tested positive. You want to make sure then that you're self-monitoring. You just want to, monitor yourself for fever, cough, shortness of breath. And then, of course, if you have a positive test, you'll follow the quarantining process for that. Make sure that also that that people are following the return to work policies that are set in place. All right, next. And I just briefly wanted to touch on this. This is something we recommend that you talk with legal counsel about, but just from an equal opportunity employment or equal employment opportunity standpoint, employers can ask about symptoms. So again, you can ask, you can have someone do a tracing, you can have them do a symptom check when they first come in. You can require them to stay home if they have symptoms. You may require a test to rule out infection, but it's not really recommended anymore. And then employees who are at that really high risk that we talked about earlier can request accommodations on a temporary basis if it causes undue hardship. What employers should not or don't have to do is really provide those accommodations to someone who's otherwise healthy but just might be in contact with someone that's high risk. And also don't want to exclude those high risk individuals, whether it be by age or a known disease, from being in the workforce where it's not an equal opportunity. So again, you wouldn't want to have your younger population come in and keep everyone that's 60 and older at home. So again, just make sure that you are paying attention when you're setting up your policies and looking at things that you are doing it equally across the board. All right, next. So just some other policy and procedure considerations. This is, again, changed. It has changed so much since March. You want to make sure that you're continually reviewing your policies, especially regarding return to work, substance testing. And the reason why we say that too is through all of this, we've seen a really big increase in abuse. And so people had lost their jobs, things have changed, it is very stressful. There's been a lot more people turning to substance to help them cope. Make sure that you're still looking at your PPE usage and then other regulatory compliance. And then determine any new policies specifically related to COVID. So especially COVID testing and screening. What are your policies if you don't have them already? Or if you do have them, do you have policies for those temp screenings and the symptom screenings, or any testing that you might want to do? And decide if things are going to be mandatory or if they're going to be voluntary, or how you're going to do things. And again, make sure that they're done across the board via policy and not just kind of a pick and choose type thing. Do you have those policies when it comes to masks and social distancing? And then are there consequences if people don't comply? And then make sure all of it is communicated. Everything needs to be communicated out to the employees so that they understand what the expectations are for them. Okay, next. I told someone once, someone asked me if I thought that everybody had lost their minds because when it came to COVID, because there's just been a lot of people that have just kind of done things that are very atypical, and people are having a hard time thinking and doing, and they're stressed and making very odd decisions. And I said, I didn't think that they lost their minds. I think they misplaced them in this like COVID alter universe. And for some people, this has been a very big stress, and it has also taken a lot of their focus. And so when people are focusing on one thing, they tend to forget about things that they might know like the back of their hand or just basic things. So make sure that you are still following standard operating procedures within your workforce. And that's the safe lifting and the carrying and the reaching, machine usage, PPE for industry that have regulatory requirements, and just everyday tasks. People are distracted, and so accidents are happening as well because people are distracted and thinking of this COVID, or maybe they're so concerned that they're 6 feet apart that they're not seeing the water on the floor that they're slipping on. Whatever the case is, just want to make sure that people are reminded to go back to the safety procedures that they know and that are currently in place, as well as the standard operating procedures. And then training. There may be a need to retrain employees, especially if they've been on reduced workloads or off of work. And again, just because COVID has taken up so much of everybody's brain space, that some retraining may be in order. Try not to forego routine safety and compliance trainings. It may not be feasible to do them all in person, but search for training options if possible. And then you may need to train individuals on new COVID processes and how those new processes coincide with the existing ones. Okay, next slide. So just real quick, we don't have much more time here, so I want to wrap up a little bit on some health and wellness. So again, it's really important that you want to keep the workforce in a good place. So general well-being, and that's proper eating, sleeping, exercise, time outdoors. Again, this has been a very, very stressful time for a lot of people. We've seen a huge uptick in our cases of individuals who are seeking out and needing some assistance, whether it's from the substance or just from other things that are going on in their mind that they need to talk to people about. So this has been a big stressor for a lot of people. So be sure that people are taking care of themselves. Another thing we've seen really is preventive care. People have delayed preventive care for fear of getting sick when they go to get their testing, so such as mammograms or colonoscopies. So it's really important that people are not delaying that care. And then the other thing that we've seen are that people are delaying care for themselves. So, we talked about how people with chronic conditions are at a higher risk. Well, if people with chronic conditions are at a higher risk for getting the disease, but they're not taking care of themselves and their chronic conditions are getting even worse, that also raises their risk. Plus, it raises their risk of just being sick in general because they've let themselves go untreated. So don't delay care, especially if you exhibit symptoms of any infection or anything is happening, pain, anything that you before COVID would have sought help for. Make sure, at Try Health, one of our things is we are really trying to let people know that we're open for them when they need it. We're safe, but we have options for in-person, phone, email, video, so that people can connect with their providers, because it really is important that they're managing that. And not to cancel medication, and make sure that you're staying up on all of those things. Okay, next. And then lastly, as I said, we have seen an uptick. Mental health is a big one. So really the focus is on what you can do to stay in the present, what you can do to help your employees stay in the present. You know, trying to make things as much as a new reality if this is, but make that as similar to the old reality as we can. News and social media is just flooded with stuff. So really sticking with trusted sources of information. Staying connected. So especially if you've got people who are telecommuting, they can feel very isolated. So it's important that everybody is connecting via phone, video, what have you, and that outside of work, people are with family and friends, church, what have you. Share your feelings with people you trust. Parenting, there's a lot of stuff going on right now too. Parents have to take on a different role. You know, reassure, answer questions, set an example. You know, and right now we have a lot of children at home. We've got parents who are trying to juggle a lot of things too. So again, the stress for parenting is also going up. Separating work from home. If again you are telecommuting, make sure that you have specific times, specific spaces even to do work, and make sure it isn't just blending with home, and because there does need to be a separation there. And then self-check. Seek help when you need it. You know, we have the EAP programs. There's an Ohio COVID-19 care line, your primary care provider, whatever it is that you or your employees need to make sure that they are in a good mental state and that they are staying strong and that they are not becoming distant and disconnected, is going to be best. Okay, next slide. So real quick then, just some visions, what we see coming on the horizon in 2021. So many experts predict that mass vaccination will be a major way to end the pandemic. There's actually being, as of August, 160 vaccines were being investigated. Some have shown some really positive results in first stages of clinical trials. And just so you know, the efforts going into this research is tremendous compared to flu vaccines and other things in the past. This is kind of like all hands on deck. So there are a lot of companies that are into this. There are a lot of people and resources that are being put into finding this vaccine. You know, major question is how long immunity is going to last, and it's going to vary in different people. And if successful, it may become a yearly problem similar to a seasonal flu. But again, a lot of unknowns out there. But you know, that's kind of what we see on the horizon. Okay, next. All right, so I know we are at our time, but just in summary, it does remain, you know, COVID-19 does remain a serious public threat. You know, a major tool today is really social distancing. And then, you know, whether they have symptoms, people have symptoms or not, limit close interactions with other people. Because the harm from complete isolation of every day is significant, the spread of the virus needs to be minimized by engineering controls and those administrative controls, screening, hand washing, and using masks. And then the future is promising. We've got more than 300 drugs and vaccines being tested. It's really a new disease. It's got a lot of hands on deck. So hopefully we will see as many changes in the next several months as we have in the past few months, or at least since March. So again, I apologize for some of the technical difficulties, and we will get the questions so we can do a question and answer type of document that we can get out to everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to join you this morning, and hopefully you've been able to take some information from what I presented today, and you can take it back to your populations, take it back to your employment, even use it in your personal life to help minimize the spread of the virus and get everybody in a good place moving forward.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. A lot of great information. It's always nice to have as much information as we can, and it's even better when it comes from someone in the medical field that we can rely on. So thank you for that. Real quick, and then we'll let you guys go. if you noticed in the chat, Jeanette's PowerPoint slides have been added to the Safety Council website page. You can find that, let's see, on our website. So if you go to the Lebanon Chamber page, then scroll down to the bottom, you'll see where it says Safety Council. Click on that, and you will notice that all the topics are there, as well as you can click on her. Actually, I'm going to share it and show you. So if you notice, here's the website. So, excuse me, here's today's meeting. And if you hover over that and click on it, it's going to download in the bottom part of your computer. Then you're able to open it and use it. We're also going to, once this ends, Jeanette was gracious enough to let us record this video. And even with the technical difficulties, I'm excited to have that because you did a great job. So come back later and you'll be able to find the actual video from Jeanette presenting the topic. So if there are not any other questions, are there, let me double check, anybody else have any questions? Tim, Michelle, you guys have anything to say?
Hi, Andy. This is Francisco from WCSC. I just want to give you guys a applause for motoring and powering through the technical difficulties. This is certainly going to be something that we'll all have to work to sometimes get through, but great presentation, Jeanette. Very timely information for all of us, and I'm so excited with the turnout that you experienced today. So we're really thankful to the Chamber for bringing this program to the Warren County employers this year.
Thank you very much. And as we navigate through all this, we will make it the best that we can. So if that is all, we will go ahead and end this. If you have any questions, I'm trying to look at the chat over here to make sure. I do think someone mentioned about the hand dryers. What are your thoughts on hand dryers with the virus? Jeanette, if you want to add something real quick, and then we'll go ahead and just close out the meeting.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back and forth. I tell you what, I'll put that in the Q&A. I will make sure that I have the latest. I know air dry is preferred, and I know there have been kind of some things lately about those hand dryers that everybody use. So I'll get back and make sure I have the latest information on that. I can put that in the Q&A.
Perfect, great. Well, thank you guys, and have a great rest of your day. One other thing real quick, enrollment forms. If you've not turned in this year's this fiscal year's enrollment form, please get that into me. If you notice as well, we have cut our dues in half. If you're a chamber member to the Lebanon Chamber, it's $25, and if you're not, it's $50. So if you have any other questions, give me a call, send us an email. We'll be happy to help you guys. And I hope you all have a great day and weekend, and we will see you guys next month. Thank you. Bye, guys.
See ya. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.